everyone, my name is Julia Jacobson, and today I'm going to show you all of my music books and repertoire selections, as well as a few of my wish list books. I think this will be a really fun video to make because I get to share all of the different books that I've been through and also reminisce on my old violin memories. In case you're new here, I would love to see my face in your subscription box. I make classical music and college lifestyle videos. Without any further ado, let's get into it. The first thing we're going to look at is all of my repertoire books. First thing is the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. This is the concerto that I'm currently working on now, and I'm really loving it. Here are my two Bach violin sonatas and partitas books. I started out with the Galamian edition, and I've moved over to the Urtext edition. I think these are both really valuable in learning Bach because the Galamian edition actually has the original Bach manuscript copies, which is really good to look at to sort of see his intentions with his music. Although the Urtext is completely blank and has no fingerings, no edits or anything, so it's really just a blank slate that you can work on, and I think that that's really helpful too. The next thing is the Beethoven Violin Sonatas. This is the second book. It has sonatas number 6 through 10. I've only done the entirety of Sonata 8, but I'm hopefully going to look at more of these in the future. This is the Henley edition. Here is Mozart Violin Concerto number 3. I learned this about 2 years ago, and it was my first really big concerto that I learned. This is the Baron Reiter edition. The next piece is the Mozart Violin Concerto number 4. These are both the International Music Company Joachim edition. I actually have two of these because there was like this huge free giveaway at my school, and they had a bunch of music books and a lot of violin books. Before I started working on Mozart 4, I got this one while I was there, and you'll see that a lot of other books that I have are also from that huge giveaway type thing. I just finished working on this piece, and Mozart is really hard, and Mozart 4 really teaches you how hard Mozart is. Next is the Bruch Violin Concerto, the first one in G minor. I have the Francescatti edition from the International Music Company. I actually learned this pretty recently as well. I learned it for my college auditions, and it is a great piece. I only learned the first movement, but I'm hoping to learn the rest sometime in the near future. The next piece I has is Sarasate's Zigeunerweisen. I learned this for my senior recital a few months ago. Everybody knows the piece Zigeunerweisen. It's from the International Music Company, and Mr. Francescatti is the one who edited it. That is probably one of the hardest pieces that I worked on to date, but I love it regardless. Next, I have a hefty bunch. With my first violin teacher, she used the Barbara Barber Solos for Young Violinists books for me to learn repertoire out of, and I bought all of the books. Absolutely all of them. They're kind of like an alternative to the Suzuki books. So I have Volume 1 into the piano part. This is more the beginner level. Volume 2 in the piano part. This is beginner/early intermediate. Volume 3 in the piano part. Intermediate. Volume 4 in the piano part. Now, Volume 4 has a few of my bigger pieces that I worked on early on. So there's Haydn Concerto number 2 in G major, the first movement. And also Charles de Berriot Concerto number 9 in A minor, which I actually worked on a year ago. Volume 5 in the piano part. This volume actually has Meditation from Thais in it, which I worked on 2.5 years ago for my governor school audition. It also has the Viotti Concerto number 23 in G major, which I worked on for a little while, and also Monti's Chartis. And then I have Volume 6 in the piano part. This is the final volume. This is more like the advanced level. This volume has the piece Scene de Ballet by Charles de Berriot, and I actually played that piece for my governor's school audition as well. Next, we have Kreisler Preludium and Allegro. I worked on this 2 years ago. It is the Schott edition. I don't know how to say that. In case you're wondering where I get most of my sheet music, it is either from sharmusic.com or from Amazon. I think that those are the two best places to buy music. The next piece is the Seats First Pupils Concerto. I actually almost played this, and then I decided to play Mozart instead. I don't know why I ended up buying this. Next, we're getting into some of the stuff that I got for free at that giveaway thing that I told you about. I got a lot of different rep books and etudes and stuff, and they're all things that I want to learn one day. They're really fun, but I haven't played most of these pieces. Here is the violin part to the Kabalevsky Violin Concerto. I have a lot of friends that have played this piece, and I think it's a really fun piece. I want to learn how to play it one day. Next, I have the Brahms Sonata for Violin and Piano in A major, Opus 100. This is the Schirmer edition, edited by Niesel and Bauer. I would love to play one of the Brahms sonatas. I think that they're some of the most beautiful pieces of work ever. Next, I have the Charles Dunclair Airs Ferice. I personally haven't heard of these pieces, but they look like really fun short pieces to learn at some point. So there's that. Next I have Handel's 6 sonatas for violin and piano. These are more beginner level sonatas, I think, although they would be really good to learn at some point because they're just really beautiful sonatas. This is from Carl Fischer and was edited by Leopold Auer and Carl Friedberg. The next piece that we have is the Brahms Sonatensatz. It is a very famous piece, and the history behind the piece and how it was created is really interesting. I've had a lot of trouble understanding the history of this piece, and if you look up FAE Sonata online, there should be more information about it. The next piece that we have is Johann Sebastian Bach's Violin Sonata No. 2 in A major. The next piece we have is Bruck's Scottish Fantasy. This is a really, really cool piece. I feel like a lot of people don't know about it, but it's actually so fun to listen to, and it's incredibly difficult. So maybe one day in the future. The next piece we have is Charles de Berrios Concerto No. 9. The full thing, I learned the first movement out of the Barbara Barber book, but this is all of the movements. Great piece. This next piece took me a while to figure out what it actually was because everything in the piece is written in Russian, but I did some research and I actually figured out that this is Paganini's variation on a Moses theme or something like that. I hope I'm saying that right. I think it'd be really cool to learn. It looks pretty difficult actually, but it looks really interesting, and I would love to explore a more lesser known piece of his. The next thing I have is one of Leopold Auer's concert transcriptions. I believe that this is the Chopin Nocturne, Opus 72. That's right. Next we have Fritz Kreisler's Scherzo for violin and piano. I don't know if I've actually heard this piece. It's probably one of Kreisler's less known pieces. It says in the style of Dittersdorf, but it would be cool to learn. It looks like more of an intermediate piece, but it's actually really cool. The last thing that I have in my repertoire category is this huge book from the International Library of Music. It's all concertos, and it's all the famous concertos, and it's just the piano part. I think the violin part was there when I was getting all of these free books, but I think somebody else might have snagged it, which good on them because that's the best part. We're taking a little turn, but the next thing we're going to look at is orchestral pieces and excerpts. I actually have a few original copies that I found for free at that place, and that's what most of these are. I do have a bunch of sheet music that I'm working through. Check out my next video after this one where I digitize all of my sheet music. But these are some of the orchestral excerpt books and actual violin part copies for orchestral pieces. So first we have here is the orchestral excerpts from the Symphonic Repertoire International Music Company book. It's the Classical and Modern Works, and it was edited by Joseph Gingold. I have looked through this, and it has a lot of really famous pieces and a lot of really great excerpts and fingerings as well. I think somebody used this book quite a lot before I got it. So there are quite a few fingerings in here that can be helpful in the future when I have to learn orchestral excerpts, because that's what I want to do. And I think it's just really cool to have all these excerpts in one place. And that was the volume 1. This one is the volume 3 of the same series. It has a lot of really great excerpts as well. The next book I have is also part of the same general series, but it's Strauss Orchestral Excerpts, and this was edited by Prill. Strauss has probably some of the most difficult excerpts of anything, of any composer. This is just a lot of those excerpts. This has Don Juan, Don Quixote, Death and Transfiguration, Macbeth, all of the really, really crazy excerpts, and I'll definitely be using the Don Juan in here. I actually have played Don Juan before, but I've played the second violin part, so I've never properly learned the first violin part. Next are all of the violin parts for orchestral pieces. I have Mendelssohn Symphony No. 4, the Italian Symphony. I've never played this piece, although I have played excerpts of it before. Next I have Mahler Symphony No. 1, which is score, I got Mahler piece. It says that this actually belongs to Interlaken, which I think is really funny because I found it for free at my school here, and it actually has bowings and fingerings and the whole shabam. So I think that this is a really, really great find. It's a violin part, an original violin part for Mahler, which is he has some of the longest pieces ever. I've played Mahler 4 before, long, but his music is beautiful and I love it so much. So this is definitely a score, quite literally. Next I have Mendelssohn's Scherzo from Midsummer Night's Dream. I have learned this excerpt for an audition before. Next is a Weber piece. It's Overture for the opera Oberon. I don't know what the English name of that is, or if that is the English name, but yeah. It looks really difficult. I have played one Weber overture before. I need to not confuse Weber and Webern. I think I've played a Weber piece before. Next, I have Beethoven's Overture No. 3 to the opera Lenore, or Fidelio. The history behind the 3 different overtures for this piece is actually really interesting, so I recommend you look it up and learn about it. I watched the Nashville Symphony play this piece, and it was great. Oh, so good. So yeah, Beethoven. Next, I have Mozart Symphony No. 39, definitely one of his bigger symphonies. This part has a lot of bowings and fingerings in it, so that'll definitely be useful in the future. And that concludes all of my orchestral pieces and excerpts. I do have one string quartet, like all parts. Some of these things may have come from Interlochen because they had a lot of older pieces that were on sale, and I think that that's where I got this quartet from. I tried to look it up, and I don't think I could find any recordings of it. So it'd be really cool. It's just like a fun sight reading piece to go through with a few friends at some point. It's Mitya Stillman's Quartet No. 7. If you've played this piece or know of this piece, please let me know because I'm really curious about it. The premiere performance was in 1937, so that's pretty contemporary. Next, we're going to go through all of my etudes and technique books and scale books. I have a lot in this category because that's the biggest thing about playing violin is technique and etudes, scales, everything. One of probably my most used books in this category is Kreutzer 42 Studies. This is the International Music Company Galamian edition. They're great etudes for the advanced level, and I really, really like these. Also, one of my Bach books had this binding on it, and you'll also see one of my scale books also has it. I got this bound at Interlochen. In their library, they have actually like a binding service, and it's actually really cheap. I think it's like $2 a book or something. But if you ever happen to be at Interlochen Music Camp, or if you go there for school or something, I don't know, if you ever happen to be there, they do have a binding service, and it's really cheap, and they do it pretty quickly too. But I have several of my books that are spiral bound, so that when I practice them, I don't have to worry about them closing on me all the time. But yeah, there's probably a lot more companies and places that do the same thing, but definitely look into like getting your books spiral bound, because it makes things a lot easier when you're practicing. You don't have to use magnets or try to keep it open. The next thing I have, it's still very shiny because I haven't gone through it, is Ivan Galamian's Principles of Violin Playing and Teaching. Galamian's ideas are like the foundation for a lot of modern violin playing, technique, and just pretty much everything. And I think that it's a really good thing to actually go through his book to understand his reasoning behind everything, and also learn about how to execute certain just general techniques. I've gone through certain sections of this book and I've used it for projects and such, but I've never read through all the way. So I would love to do that at some point, but I definitely recommend picking this up. I got it from Shar, and it is a little bit on the pricey side, but I think it's totally worth it to learn about Ivan Galamian's teaching. Next, we have my current scale book that I use the absolute most. It's Barbara Barber's Scales for Advanced Violinists. You'll see that I also have the Carl Flesch book, but the Carl Flesch is very complex in how it's written, and I think it's made to be as compact as possible and concise, but also have a lot of different options for practicing depending on what level you're playing at. But I think that Barbara Barber just makes it so much easier to read because she doesn't have different rhythms and stuff, and it's just all laid out very plainly and simply, but it still has all of the difficult things that you would find, like fingered octaves, tenths, and all the general scale things. But I currently use the Barbara Barber book, and my current teacher and the teacher before my current teacher both preferred this book. Next, like I mentioned, is the Carl Flesch scale book. This was the book that my first 2 teachers used. I've had 4 teachers, and it's definitely very, very, very compact. It has a lot in there, which is a good and a bad thing. And I'm sure I'll be using it again at some point. It's a very great scale system. Next, I have another scale book. It's the Simon Fisher Scales book. It has a lot of really great exercises for scales, which is a lot of what I used it for. But it has arpeggios, it has scales. The only thing is with this book is that it categorizes things differently. So when it comes to scales, it doesn't have a scale and its arpeggios and thirds and tenths and octaves like all within like 2 pages. It has all the scales in one like section of the book and then all of the arpeggios in another section, and it's just harder to read through and deal with because it's so disjointed. Still a great book, has a lot of really great exercises. I highly recommend. The next is the Simon Fisher book that I recommend the most because I love Simon Fisher, is Simon Fisher's practice book. This is the thickest violin book I have, but it is probably the most useful violin book I have. It has every single exercise you could possibly ever need for every single piece that you'd ever play on violin. It is a really, really great book, and I refer to it so much. It's just really great if you want to improve your technique or to figure out what you're doing wrong or just to learn anything. Highly recommend. Great book. Next, I have the Basic Simon Fisher book, which is actually very similar to the practice book. The practice book has step-by-step practice methods, and the basics book has exercises and practice routines. They both have somewhat different information, but the basics book is also a really great investment as well. Boy, I'm doing a lot of talking. I'm sorry if this is a long video, but I love talking about this stuff. I think it's so cool. The next thing, and I promise this is my last Simon Fisher thing, is Simon Fisher's Warming Up. I've been going through this book every single day and just going through all of the different warm-ups in my own warm-up and just trying out everything that's in this book. I think that's the best way to learn about the Simon Fisher books, is to just go through a little bit every day. And this has a lot of really, really, really great warm-up exercises. I'm almost done, so I need to figure out what I'm going to do when I'm done. But it is a great, great book. I had to get this book from Simon Fisher's website, which means it had to come from Europe. The next technique book that I have is Ivan Galamian and Frederick Newman's Contemporary Violin Technique. This I got last summer, and it has been really, really great for getting different bowing and rhythmic variations. I'll show you what I mean. So there's like different ways that you could change the bowing in something to make your fingers adjust to it. And then there are also different rhythmic patterns that you can use. That's what people mean when they say play in rhythms and such. This has rhythmic variations that you can use. The other part of the book just has a lot of different scale and arpeggio exercises. Now we're going to get into some of more of the etudes that I have. Here are some of the most difficult etudes you could ever play. These are Minkowski etudes. But these are the Paganini Caprices. I've only played one Paganini Caprice, and that's number 16, and I did it for college auditions. My current teacher actually prefers the Rodet Caprices. The Rodet Caprices are more technique specific, so I'm not going to be learning Paganini for a little bit unless I need to, but I have learned one of the Caprices, and this is the Henley edition. So next I have the Rodet Caprices. I haven't learned any of these yet, but I'm really excited to go through them once I'm finished with Kreutzer etudes. Next, I have Wolfart Opus 45, 60 Studies for the Violin, books 1 and 2. I've actually recently been using these as a sight reading exercise that is part of my warm-up. If you're interested, you can go check out my violin warm-up video where I talk about this. I'm basically just going through one etude a day and practicing sight reading because I haven't read these in so long that it's basically sight reading. But this is a great book. I used to do Wolfart etudes pretty exclusively when I was more at an intermediate level, and they're really, really great exercises. I haven't been through all of them though, so I'm excited to read through all of them. Next, I have the Josephine Trott Melodious Double Stops book. I have been through a few of these because my old teacher preferred them. This might be a good sight reading exercise one day, because at this point, this stuff isn't too difficult for me anymore, although double stops can always be tricky no matter what. Next, I have Don't's 24 Studies, Preparatory to Kreutzer and Rodet Studies, Opus 37, edited by Ivan Galamian, and it's the International Music Company edition. I have done like maybe 1 or 2 of these pieces, and they're preparatory to Kreutzer and Rodet, so I don't anticipate doing much more out of the Don't book. Don't Opus 35, I think, is the more difficult book, but this is Opus 37. But this may also be good for sight reading exercise, although these are a lot more difficult than Wolfart or Kaiser etudes. Next, I have the Subchick Opus 9 Preparatory Exercises in Double Stopping for the Violin. I may have done something in this book. I think one of my teachers recommended it to me, and I bought the book, but I know Subchick is a really popular technique book person, and I think that I do need to go through his exercises at some point, so I may incorporate this into my warm-up at some point as well. Next, I have the Shradiak or Shradic, I've heard it both ways, School of Violin Techniques, Book 1, Volume 515. The Shradic book has been, like, I've written all over it. I've used it so much in my violin practice. It is a really, really great, like, warm-up exercise book just for getting your fingers in the right mode, you know what I mean? I've been through like the first maybe 10 pages and then I haven't done much more. This may also be good to put into my warm-up routine at some point. There's so many violin etudes, like there's almost too many violin etudes, like there's so much, but this is a great book. I highly recommend. Next is the Kaiser Elementary and Progressive Studies for the Violin, Opus 20. This is also a really great etude book. I think I did this after Wolfart. I think it's a little bit more difficult, but I have sight read through all of these etudes already, and they're really, really, really great etudes for more of an intermediate level. Next, this is one of my newest books that I've gotten. It is the Fiorillo 36 Caprices or Etudes for the Violin. This is from Carl Fisher Music Library, and I have heard a lot about these etudes. They look very difficult, some of them, at a first glance, and they look very musical, but I think that it'll be fun to learn some of these at some point. In case you don't already know this about me, I think like etudes and like technique exercises and stuff, like and scales even, like I think that stuff is so fun. Like I love doing it, and just looking at this book gets me excited. Next, I have Introducing the Positions for Violin, Volume 2. Now, I did have Volume 1, although I think I lent it to a friend, and either they're still using it or they forgot to give it back. I don't remember. I don't need it anymore, so it doesn't matter. But I do have Volume 2 by Harvey Whistler. I didn't use this that much, although it is really good for becoming more comfortable with the positions. This one especially is good because it goes through the 2nd, 4th, 6th, and 7th positions. There are really good exercises that I could probably still use that is in this book, and I should probably incorporate it a little bit more. Next, I have one of the earlier books that I used in my violin playing, the Viva Vibrato book. If you look at some of my really old Instagram videos, 3 years ago, if you look at some of my Instagram videos from like 3 years ago, you will know that I used to have terrible vibrato. It was very like narrow and shaky and just not beautiful at all, and it was really ugly. I used a few exercises from this book to get my vibrato up and running, and I think that it's a great book. Don't let the cover fool you. Everything in here is still very useful. Now I have a few free books and books that I bought for really cheap at like secondhand stores and stuff. This is the Sevcik Opus 1, Part 1, School of Technique for viola. I decided to pick up a few secondhand viola books because I know I'll have to learn viola at some point, just because my career demands me to know multiple instruments for some reason. I'm excited to learn viola. I don't have a viola yet because I don't have the money to buy a viola, but hopefully I can learn soon. If anybody out there has a cheap viola, hit me up. I also have Wolfart Foundation Studies for the viola, also to help me in my viola skills. Next, I have the Dankla Opus 74 School of Mechanism for the Violin. They're 50 daily exercises, and they just look like more etudes, which I may sight read at some point, although some of these look kind of difficult. They're very scalar. Next, I have the Modern Hohmann Wolfart Beginning Method for Violin, Volume 1 by Harvey Whistler. But it has just a lot of really beginner exercises and etude kind of stuff. I don't anticipate sight reading this or anything, but in case I'm ever teaching and I need some basic exercise for a student, then this would be useful. Next, I have 2 more books that I got from the International Library of Music. They're both etude books. There's multiple different editors for these books. There's no one set person. This book in particular has 2nd, 3rd, and 4th positions, like exercises. This is going to be so much footage to edit through. Oh, I was going to post this today. This is the same book except Volume 1. So this is Fundamental Bowing in the 1st position. That concludes all of my etudes and technique books. I have a few other miscellaneous books that I wanted to show you. The first thing is I just wanted to include this because it's so cute. It's an essential dictionary of music, and it basically has like every music term possible in like multiple different languages and like your definitions and translations and such. And it also has some like music theory explanations and such. This is a really, really helpful book, and I haven't used it that much, but I'm in quarantine. I don't really have a need for it quite yet. This is more of like if in orchestra I see a term and I have no idea what it means, then this would be useful for that. But this also has different composers and just everything that you would ever need to know. This is a great book. I bought this from my local music store, but I think you could buy this from alfred.com. It also fits in my case, which is part of why it's so great. It's small, compact. Next, I have a book from the International Library of Music, once again, except that this is probably the coolest book I own. This has like a history of violin playing, like of all of violin playing, and it has different violin composers like Paganini and principles of violin technique, and it's what is that? This has full charts of the genealogy of violin playing. I'm sure if I told my teacher that I had something like this, he would go nuts because my teacher loves stuff like this. This is so cool. This is so cool. Okay, I really need to read this because I have not read it. Oh, it's so cool. I love violin pedagogy and everything of that sort. So this book is like, this is so cool. Oh my god, this is so cool. Okay, I need to stop talking because I'm going to talk about it too much. This is like part of some kind of really old music magazine where they had like articles about certain musical things, and then they also had like pieces at the end of it. I think I've heard of something like this before, but it's really interesting. And if you have like an antique store nearby, you may be able to find things like this. But it just has a few piano pieces and then also some cool articles in it. The last thing that I'm going to show you is actually a little mystery. I have this violin part that I got from, I think, a secondhand shop or something. And I have had it for like a year or two now. And I don't know what piece it is. It doesn't have any bowings or fingerings in it. And it has very basic markings, like nothing's in German, everything's very basic. I'll include a few pictures here of what it looks like. I have no idea what piece this is. I've played through it, I've asked other people, nobody knows. So if you can help me identify this piece, it's just like cool little mystery, help me out. It's a first violin part also, in case that is helpful. It does look like an orchestral piece, for sure. I don't know what this is. This might be a clarinet concerto. Clarinetist, help me. Because it looks like it has a solo clarinet part, like, you see it. Anyways, that is all of the music books that I have. I had to take so much stuff out of my closet. It's not going to be fun to put it all back in here. Now, I just have a short list of violin books that I want to get at some point soon. The first is the Jennifer Johnson, like, What You Need to Know About the Body for Violinists book. I don't know the exact name of it, but I think it'd be a really, really good book to read, and I do want to be able to understand what's going on with my body, how I can incorporate that understanding into my violin playing more, and I think it'll be really helpful in how I play and how I carry myself in my everyday life so that I can play better. Another book is I want to get Simon Fisher's tone book. I've had it recommended a lot. I do really want to improve my tone. Maybe in the past year or so, it's gotten a lot better, but there's still more to improve about it, so I want to get the Simon Fisher tone book. And then another book, which I really want to get because I was reading through it and I never got to finish it, is the Violin Mind book, which goes through like different intonation systems and how to play and tune on the violin. It's really interesting. I really want to buy it because it's just so useful and it's so interesting to read. It's like opened up my mind about violin playing and tuning systems. So yeah, I want those 3 books as of right now. There's probably a longer list in my head that I don't have completely articulated. I really hope you enjoy this video. It's gonna be kind of long, but I hope that it's interesting to you. Let me know like what some of your favorite violin books that you have in the comments, or your repertoire list, or your current repertoire, whatever you want. I think it's really interesting to like sort of know what kind of books other people have and what kind of editions that they learned through and what their teachers' preferences were. A lot of the books that I have here are comprised of stuff that I got for free, and these are some of the hidden gems that you find in some places because classical music may or may not be becoming irrelevant in today's world, and that's why all the libraries are getting rid of all of this old music because nobody plays it anymore. But yeah, if you're interested, please help me figure out what this piece is. I would love to know, just because, you know, you gotta wonder. Anyways, I hope you all really enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like and comment down below. And if you enjoy this kind of content, please subscribe. I really love seeing new faces here. I hope this video was interesting. I know that sometimes, like, when people come up with ideas and they film videos, it's, like, more interesting to them, like, than it is for the person watching. So I hope that this is somewhat interesting. But anyways, I hope you all have a really wonderful day, and I thank you so much for watching. In case you're interested in more about me and my violin life and practicing, you can go follow my practice Instagram, which is Julia Jacobson Violin. I post videos daily on there. I'm currently doing the 100 days of practice challenge, and I'm really loving it because it's making me a lot more consistent. Anyways, I hope you all have a really great day. And if you've watched to the end, congratulations. Like, you've been through a long video. But yeah, I hope you all have a splendid day, and goodbye.